With Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC summit, both leaders announced a climate change deal that they say is designed to reduce carbon emissions by almost a third over the next 15 years, with non-binding goals for the reduction of these pollutants. But what some environmentalists are calling a big first step in the efforts to reverse the effects of climate change is getting the cold shoulder from many Republican lawmakers. CNN Chief Congressional Correspondent Dan Abash is here with more on that. Dan, what is the principal Republican objection to this deal? Is it the idea that it's a job killer?
It is. It's everything from a job killer to a charade. That's what Republicans are saying. Look, you know, a lot of people asked last week, what does Republican control of Congress really mean? Will it really be that different? The answer is yes, and the issue of climate change is Exhibit A.
Mitch McConnell hosting newly elected Senate Republicans in his Capitol office for the first time since their victories put him in charge as majority leader and made him a more powerful adversary for the president.
The president continues to send signals that he has no intention of moving toward the middle.
McConnell was eager to express outrage about a sweeping deal President Obama struck hours earlier in China to limit greenhouse gas emissions.
This is an ambitious goal, but it is an achievable goal.
China agreed to peak its carbon emissions by 2030, the U.S. to reduce by nearly a third by the year 2025. McConnell isn't buying it.
Requires the Chinese to do nothing at all for 16 years, while these carbon emission regulations are creating havoc in my state and other states around the country.
Fighting government regulation was a key part of McConnell's re-election campaign in coal-rich Kentucky.
Gets jobs for people who are hurting, and that stops the war on coal now.
Mitch is a friend of coal.
In fact, partisan differences over climate change are among the deepest in the newly divided government. Listen to what Ted Cruz told us earlier this year.
Do you believe climate change is real?
I'm always troubled by a theory that fits every perfect situation.
You don't believe that there is any man-made reason for global warming or climate change?
What I think is the data are not supporting what the advocates are arguing.
Perhaps the most stark difference with the GOP's Senate takeover is control of the committee overseeing environmental regulation. Staunch Democratic environmentalist Barbara Boxer will hand the gavel to Republican James Inhofe, who wrote the book, literally, on man-made climate change being a hoax, saying only God can affect the climate.
My point is, God's still up there. And this is the arrogance of people who think that we, human beings, would be able to change what he is doing in the climate is, to me, outrageous.
Since there is no chance Congress will pass legislation reducing U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, Republicans fully expect the president to use his executive powers to at least start, as he has done before. But McConnell has promised that when he's in charge of the Senate next year, Republicans will reverse that and reverse other EPA regulations, Jake, by using Congress's power of the purse, and that could set up a showdown and even potentially another shutdown.
Another shutdown?
Even though Mitch McConnell says it's not going to happen, if they're on this collision course, you never know.
He only controls the Senate. He doesn't control the House. Dan Abash, thank you so much. One of the most outspoken critics of the deal, you just heard him in the piece right there, Senator Jim Inhofe, Republican from Oklahoma, the soon-to-be chair of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, and he joins me now. Senator Inhofe, thanks so much for joining us. You say you're against this plan because you think China is getting off too easy and because you simply don't believe China will do enough to reduce its carbon footprint. But is that really your issue with the deal? I thought you didn't think carbon emissions were a problem.
Well, no, I don't think so. In fact, the science has totally changed since 2001. Back then, everything was global warming and we're all going to die and all that. And then as we realized, Jake, what the cost was going to be. The cost would be the largest tax increase in the history of America, $300 to $400 billion every year. And you got to keep in mind, you remember when Lisa Jackson was the director of the EPA, appointed by Obama. And I asked her the question on the record, live on TV. I said, if we pass any of this cap and trade stuff, either by regulation or by legislation, will that have the effect of reducing CO2 emissions? Her answer was, no, it wouldn't, because this is not where the problem is. It's in China, it's in India, it's in Mexico. You know, you can carry that argument further, Jake, and say that as we would reduce ours and chase our manufacturing base to China where they have no regulations, it would have the effect of increasing, not decreasing, CO2.
Okay, well, I take your point, but without getting into remedies, let's just talk about man-made climate change itself. There's a scientific consensus, overwhelming, that climate change is real, that it at least partly man-made, that some action must be taken. Now, you've called it a conspiracy. What are you talking about?
No, I'm just saying that when you say that science is settled and the overwhelming scientific analysis comes to that conclusion, Frank, that is just not correct. I can remember back in about 2002 or 2003 when I first started finding out from scientists that the science is not there, and then all of a sudden it started rolling in, and I published in the Congressional Record not hundreds but thousands of scientists who disagree with the United Nations. Keep in mind, the scientists that I'm talking about, that's the United Nations that we're talking about. And there are many of them who were supposed to be taking part in that, and they were not allowed to do it because they didn't agree with what their consensus was.
All right.
Well, and by the way, this China thing, let's keep in mind, President Xi, he said they're going to continue to increase their emissions until 2030. Well, he'll be long gone after that, and so it's easy for them to say something like that, when in fact they are saying they're going to increase one additional coal-fired plant every 10 days in China for the foreseeable future.
All right, Senator. Well, the overwhelming majority of scientists disagree with you, but I do want to move on to one other